Okay, so most offices, or a lot of offices, have one of these things, a in-out board that's a whiteboard. People write on it. It's confusing. It's not easy to understand, but it is kind of fun. Ours gets a lot of non-work sort of related stuff on it. But there are some problems. Some of the people that have left, like Paul up top, is retired. It's a lot of work to shift everybody up, right? They were ordered by height, so tall people, it's a problem when they retire. There's no indication of when these statuses were put up, and somebody has to add that date every day, which is really troublesome. So we also use Slack in our office, and I noticed that we can set our status in Slack. So just using Slack, you can put an emoji in, and then you can put in your status. And we use Slack for a few things. We have Daryl's written a monitoring bot that we can see our server status, and we can have different versions of Craig's name pop up using that bot. So, and we have Giphies, so we use Giphies to express ourselves quite frequently on here. It's a little hit or miss. So I took that Slack status, and using the Slack API and server-sent messaging, I was able to push it to a web page. So now we can have a new status board, just mount a monitor on the wall. It's easy to read. It encourages people to use Slack and to actually sign in, because that's a problem with all these messaging systems in offices. People are like a little lazy about signing in every day. The date updates automatically, huge time saver. And you can tell when those statuses were updated, right? If somebody hasn't updated their status for a long time, you know that they're not signing into Slack, and you can go and make them. And really great thing is it can be updated remotely, right? So if it's -40 and your car won't start, you can go on your phone, on your Slack app, and you can put on there in late, or taking the dog to the vet or whatever. So I think that's kind of a cool feature. So yeah, that's what I've built. And I'll have a little bit of the technical. I didn't go too much detail. So it's built using the Slack and the Slack API. Because of our network on campus is really kind of restricted and put into silos. It's for security reasons. Anything that's on the Wi-Fi network can't be seen by the outside world. So I had to write a little bot that talks to the outside world on one of our outside-facing servers. It basically receives Slack updates on the status, writes it to a JSON file, and then another server that sits on the wireless network uses server-sent messaging to just make requests. They call it server-sent messaging, but it's actually polling. So it just polls, and every 3 minutes you get a new update. So the clock on there goes up by, or 3 second intervals, the clock goes up. And yeah, so that's what I built. Yep.
So this is my annual UX Don't Forget About Us talk, and is basically don't be like us, so learn from us. I don't know, change is hard. We've heard that, I think, a few times. So there are ways that we can make it easier, and I think since I've been at Memorial, I think we've changed every major system that we use in the library in the last 6 years. It's just been constant change. So that's hard on staff, that's hard on us. That's hard on our users. So UX and usability can help fix that. So what do? We test. So you're going to get tired of me saying this all the time, but that's the answer. So when to test? Always and often. How many are doing a migration right now? I'm just curious. How many have already made a migration, like their ILS recently? There's a lot, right? It's painful. So when are we going to do this? When to test? As I said, always and often, there's all sorts of times to think about when you're doing a migration. So what we should have done was done it during the RFP process. Start looking at other institutions that have the same system that we're going to be moving to. Test theirs. It's out there. You can use somebody else's system even if that's not what your students are going to use. You can still test. Training. You're the first person who's going to be using this new system. You are the first person to identify issues. Use that opportunity to start figuring out what needs to be fixed and start setting up a plan. Sandbox. Most times we've got a sandbox. If you don't have a sandbox, get a sandbox. You want to be testing it before you go live. So you can use this with your staff. You can use it with your users beforehand. It's there. Use it. And production. Once you've launched, you're not done. You got to keep going, keep testing, keep making those improvements. So what to test? Basically all the things. That includes things like terminology, the back end, the interface. How are you going to do this? You're going to do this through your normal usability testing. So A/B testing, if you're doing it in an RFP process, test it on somebody else's. They're using their terminology. Use their instance to see if they're using better terms than you are. You can do it in new versus old interfaces. So if you have a sandbox, has the change that you've made in the new system actually been an improvement? Test it against the new one. Terminology. We've already heard today that terminology is a problem. Now's your chance to be able to do that. Scenario-based testing, we've heard that before. It's one of the best ways to figure out what our students are actually doing is actually watching them do it. And there's lots of UX and usability things that you can do as well, like interviews, love-hate letters. So get them to write a letter about your existing discovery layer. What do they love and what do they hate? And how is that new system going to improve it? And how can you use your migration to do testing? So the biggest thing to remember out of all of this is make it a priority. So that was our problem. We had great intentions, but our migrations tend to move really, really fast. And sometimes they're not driven on our timelines. And if you don't all agree at the beginning that this is a priority and we're going to take the time to do it and get the best product out first, it isn't going to get done. So make it a priority. Make sure you include it in your migration process at the various points. And hopefully you'll be releasing a better product for your users and change will be easier. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Krista. And Andrew Nagy's next up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Nagy. I'm with EBSCO, Director of Software Innovation. I spend most of my time at EBSCO working with or supporting the FOLIO project, which is an open source library services platform. I don't know how many of you are familiar with FOLIO. So for those of you who are not, I think it's really cool. That's why I work at EBSCO. That's why I took the job that I have. I'm very fortunate to be able to be in this position. It is truly a collaborative project with universities and vendors to build a platform. I think a lot of people kind of have been equating FOLIO to an ILS system, and it is our vision to be able to offer a full ILS system on FOLIO, but it's truly a platform for development. So it's so much more than that, and it doesn't even have to be an ILS system for you. It can truly just be a development platform to work from. It has components like data storage, SaaS-based routing of requests from one tenant to another, and the ability to install functionality and components for individual tenants. So if you're looking for a SaaS-based platform at your university, and you're not even interested in replacing your ILS system because you already just migrated, it doesn't necessarily have to be an ILS replacement. So this is just kind of the architecture, but I'm not here to talk about that. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of it. What I really want to talk about, if you want more, go to those websites. What I really want to talk about is something that I'm very proud that my employer is doing, which we created what we call the Innovation Challenge. So we have set aside $100,000 US to give out to libraries. So if you're interested in raising funds for your institution, or you just have a great idea of some new technology that you want to build, or you're already working on something and you could really use some additional funding to help support that, we've set aside $100,000 worth of US dollars for that innovation work. The caveat is that it's something that has to be built on the FOLIO platform. So if you are looking to create some new sort of concept, and I'll talk about a couple of quick ideas, we've already given out $25,000 so far. So there's some opportunities to get somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000 for your project. So there's $75,000 left. And I know of a couple of institutions that are already working on proposals that are really cool. So if you want to be a part of this, if you want to try and raise some funds for your institution, get on it. So we already had one deadline where we awarded 2 universities. The next deadline is the end of this year. And then there's a third deadline in the spring. So we so far funded the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. They are taking their home-built circulation module that circulates tablets and laptops and things like that, and they're going to be building that on top of the FOLIO platform. And we've also funded Villanova to port their Viewfind platform or their Viewfind OPAC onto the FOLIO platform as well. So there's a lot of really cool projects happening, and there's a lot of other good proposals on their way. If you want to learn more, you can email us at this email address. We're happy to help you put together a proposal. And my one caveat is feel free to be interested in applying, even if you don't have developers on staff, even if you don't have a way of doing that. We have developers coming to us asking how they can contribute. And so they might be interested in working on your idea. That's it.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Next up, we have Amy Paterson talking about providing childcare at conferences. Did you have any slides?
I don't know.
Awesome.
I have this running joke with myself that I get so many ideas whenever I go to conferences, and I love it, but half of those ideas are all about how I would run a conference. So that is to say that this is sort of a switching gears from technology, but it is very much about access, and it's about conferences, so I'm hoping that that will justify 5 minutes of your time. So, by the way, my name's Amy, and I'm from Thompson Rivers University. I still remember last Access, Chris Berg's keynote, where she talked about this really small battle that she got a lot of pushback over when she cites that one of the proven small things you can do to get more women in tech is to take down Star Trek posters. And that's not my personal battle because I love Star Trek, but I have my own, and that is when you plan your conferences, the small thing you can do is to consider childcare needs. So I'm hoping that the whys of this will be very straightforward because I just signed up for this and I don't have any slides or data with me. But I hope we can take it as fairly a given that childcare concerns affect women in general far more than they affect men. And I hope that we can take that even farther to say that they affect women in more vulnerable positions, such as precarious work, non-union environments, women without support systems, even more. That one might be a little more tenuous, but I'm fairly confident. Personally, anecdotally, I can tell you that I've been a librarian for 6 years and a mom for 5 years, and for 4 of those years, I didn't attend a single professional conference or networking event primarily for that reason. And that also coincided with my years of precarious work. And once last year, having no other options, I actually took my 4-year-old to BCLA, and she sat beside me in every single session of the 3-day conference. And the overwhelming response I got from other women at this conference was, "Who told you you could do that?" Not like, "How dare you," but like, "How come I didn't know that I could do that?" So that's my perceive on the why. The how is actually a little bit more complicated. So what I'm doing right now is we're hosting a very small conference later this year at TRU, and I'm doing local arrangements. So I was like, yes, I'm gonna have childcare. I'm gonna have it paid for. This is gonna be great. I can do this. It's so small, it won't be a big deal. Spoilers, it was a big deal. So first of all, I was like, okay, so what do I need to do this? I'm a librarian. I have no idea how to set up childcare. But then also, I'm a librarian. I know about finding things that I don't know about. So I contacted the ECE program at the university. If you worked at a university, maybe you also have an ECE program, or there probably is something. So she told me that unless certain exceptions are made, I would need a license. And this is going to depend on your province. I looked at the licensing requirements. temporary childcare licenses are actually no less complicated than regular childcare licenses, which is a problem. One exception is that if all the parents are immediately available for the children, you can get out of licensing. So if you are doing a big conference, say in a hotel where there's a room that is suitable, that might be something that you could bypass those licensing restrictions. For me, when I wasn't even sure where all my locations were going to be, I was like, okay, so I can't do this. Maybe I could look into something else. Maybe we could still like pay for it. But the funding comes from an outside agency. No, we can't pay for it. So I'm like, this is very frustrating. What are we going to do? So what I ended up doing, and I'm of mixed feelings as to whether this was good enough. I looked around for the Childcare Family Resource Center in Kamloops, where I live, and I called them and I told them about our situation. I was hoping they could give me like a list of childcare centers that do day service so I could reach out to them personally and set people up. And they said, why don't you give them our information, because that information changes and it wouldn't be accurate by the time you had it, and then they can contact us directly and we'll work with each family to set it up. So in the end, I think that's what I'm going to do with all the other sort of local arrangements. I'll make sure that people know that this is the resource that they have. And obviously, that's not what my end goal would be, but all the factors I thought worked in my favor, like the smallness of our conference and our short timeline, kind of ended up working against me. And it's a step. And I think when we talk about this area, even any step, what you can do is important, because right now there is absolutely no messaging on this. And so the message is stay home. And as long as we continue to not message on this, that will continue to be what women with children, and I guess some men as well, are hearing, anyone in this situation. So I want to keep taking steps, keep pushing forward on this issue until everyone has equal access to lovely, awesome professional networking events like this one.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Amy. It's like so great to have that conversation, especially somebody who has just been through the ringer with that, and to hear, about the actual issues that you hit and the things you were able to do, because it is definitely messy. Yeah, great. All right, so next up we have Megan, who's going to talk about digital citizenship and curricula.
Hi, my name is Megan. I have to stand on my tiptoes. I am caveat. I am a public librarian, so this talk is going to be very fluffy, but it's a warm room. So this is an issue that has come up for me in my career. It's really more of a thought experiment that I keep revisiting over and over, but I cannot think of a single time that I have been genuinely kind to someone online. I've been in a lot of classrooms, both before my MLIS and after, and this question comes up when I'm thinking about them right now and talking with them. Right now I'm focusing on ethical issues and digital citizenship. This definition's from Terry Hikes at teachthought.com. He also describes digital citizenship as the quality of habits, actions, and consumption patterns that impact the ecology of digital content and communities. And then the alternate definition is the self-monitored habits that sustain and improve the digital communities you enjoy or depend on. So as we become more dependent on digital communities, how are our habits developing along with that? It's possible to be articulate or sarcastic, but can you be kind. So this is the current state of the curricula-based sort of approach that I'm taking when I go into classrooms. This is from Common Sense Education, which is a great online resource for anyone who works with kids or students. Mostly it addresses ways of how to be nice or considerate and the issues that come up with all of these different realms when you're interacting with people online. And I'm not sure where to go with that, except that going beyond the curricula would require a certain kind of platonic intimacy as it applies to the people in our lives and our understanding of digital environments. So to illustrate, I have a tweet. I really like the paradox of this tweet and how mental health always complicates our relationships with each other. It illustrates how we try to manage both our in real life relationships and our not in real life relationships in the gray area between those two. Public posts normally invite engagement with a community, and yet this one sort of subverts that. Please don't talk to me about this. It's funny, but it's also, and it's got a lot of, I think, likes and retweets because of the humor, but also no replies. I'm intimate enough with Twitter to know that that means that people are absorbing this information without comment and sort of tacitly allowing Darcy to be in a digital space without comment or judgment. So is that kindness? Can you interpret that as kindness? If you have a story about how you've been kind to someone online, I would love to hear it. If you have educational resources about how to teach this sort of thing, if kids don't develop empathy by a certain age, will they be a troll forever? If you have experiences with academic students about this issue, please share them with me. Also, I have a fun video that I've shared on Slack, so you can take a look at that. Thank you. Was that 5 minutes?
There was like 3 and a bit minutes. Yes. Man, you guys are crushing it. We're actually kind of ahead of schedule. All right. Next up, we've got Dale Askey, who wants to talk about leadership and participation. Did you want this guy for anything?
So no slides, but we have our audience participation, so this will be fun. It's going to be fun. Really. Damn it. Okay, so a couple of assumptions I want to lay out there, and you can disagree with them or agree with them, and then we're all together. If you're in this room, if you're watching on the live stream, you are someone who cares about applying and developing technology to help libraries evolve and meet new challenges. General agreement? Broad statement. Okay, yeah. The second one is, there are no slides for a reason, which is I've discovered that this kind of commentary can be taken out of context, and I'm really tired of sideways attacks from people who are like, well, you said this thing, and it's like, well, you didn't hear the other 500 words that went with the 6 words that got tweeted. So no slides. I don't care if you tweet it, really. I just don't care. Because people are going to be kind. Because they were saying that they saw the last talk. And I also want to emphasize just bringing it back to just, there's an individual here talking. This is not about one person, one situation, or one institution. This is about sort of a broader issue in libraries and how we need to move faster and be better as organizations. I'm actually quite happy at my institution. I'm not up here sort of grunting about how disgruntled I am at McMaster. So now the audience participation part. So and these are not rhetorical questions. I want to see hands in the air, okay? And the only people who are excused, and this isn't any kind of bad thing, is you're excused if you work for a vendor because the questions aren't relevant. But if you want to play along, please do. Let's just all get into this. So the first question is really easy. If you self-define as a library or GLAM administrator and are in this room or on the live stream, for all I care, raise your hand if you're an administrator. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I knew a couple of y'all. Yeah. So let's just say there weren't many those of you on the live stream, there weren't many hands up. Okay. So that's the first thing you need to know. The second one is, if you're not administrators, that means the rest of you. How many of you have this sort of in your vague, this is where my life is going, have this as a career goal? or might consider this as a career path? Hands, come on, hands. Again, okay, I'm not surprised. I thought it would be a fairly small number of hands going up. So think about that for a second. And for the rest of you, and this is really about everyone. Now everyone's back in the game now because you're not excluded. How many of you participate actively in the recruitment and hiring of your senior leadership? And I don't mean bitching on Twitter. That doesn't count. How many of you actually participate actively in the recruitment and hiring of your higher administration? Okay. Wow, I see a lot of kind of half-hearted hands, so I'm not quite sure what that means. But again, it wasn't everybody's hand, and that's the point of this lightning talk, is that everybody's hand should be up here, because I think there's something to talk about here. I gave a talk at Access in 2008 on a different topic. It had to do with open source. But late in the talk, I said something that I realized I said again in 2014 in a talk, and I'm up here talking about it again. And I've had so many side conversations at this Access and every single Access I've ever gone to about this, which is about sort of the disgruntlement and the dissatisfaction of people working in technology with their upper administration. They don't understand us. They don't resource us properly. We're not advancing. We're not ever really part of the core strategy. It's not universal. There are certainly institutions where this is the case. But let's just maybe agree that broadly this is not really, we haven't made that turn in libraries. And one of the things I said in 2008, which was kind of, this is the thing you should not tweet. I made mention of people, of library leaders, and this was 2008, remember, so it was 10 years ago almost. There are people who are what I called legacy administrators, which sounds really negative, and maybe I kind of meant it negatively. People whose consciousness was formed in sort of a pre-Google era, like, a Telnet, like green screen era, and so are not really sort of technology people and don't really think in that mindset. But they sort of have a stranglehold on library leadership, and 10 years have passed, and it really hasn't the needle there hasn't moved a great deal in some ways. And when I said legacy administrator, I remember afterwards, I'm going to use her name because it was such a beautiful exchange, and I hope she doesn't mind. Sorry. Martha Whitehead, who was a AUL at Queen's, and now is, of course, now the UL at Queen's, comes running up to me. She's like, oh my God, am I a legacy administrator? And I said, if you're here and you're asking me that question, I think you're not. You're here at Access, so I excused her. But this, whatever, But there's something about this, and so this lack of administration that has a background in any sort of technical work and projects means that we are just going to always be frustrated, thwarted in some ways. We have to sort of move this, and it means that we don't move forward and we don't evolve, certainly not fast enough to keep up with sort of what's happening around us in the academy or in our communities. This applies to all libraries, frankly. And we really miss opportunities to add value to our communities. We know what we could be doing if only. There's always this thing. I had a conversation here, so like I said, this comes up over and over again, with one of the people who put their hands up as being an administrator, and we were talking about needing to have national strategies in Canada to solve all sorts of issues. Like maybe we need to not have we don't need to all have individual Dataverse instances and have all this redundant effort. Maybe we just need to have one global Dataverse instance for Canada. But that when those conversations happen, it's a lot of voices in the room, and it's a lot of, frankly, UL voices in the room. They're the people who are outward directed, the people who speak to these things. And half the people in that conversation, and this is maybe a little bit disparaging, but I mean it in sort of they know something else. They're not really qualified to speak about these issues because they don't have the background in this kind of work. And so they're kind of in there, I got briefed by somebody in my organization, and they go talk about it. But there's a telephone and translation game that goes on there. I see, this is again just a statement of reality. I see this with my own boss. She can often talk about things that I talk about, but her understanding of it is fairly shallow because it's not her work, and she's never worked in these areas. And so when push comes to shove, there's a bit of a translation problem there. So if that's how these decisions are made with a bunch of ULs at a table, those ULs have to represent technology, or the agenda gets set at a very high level with some serious problems, maybe. So going back to the three questions that I posed at the outset, I kind of want to leave you with three things to consider and work on. One is to urge administrators to show up here or somewhere where technology is being talked about. Okay, like they need to put on their calendars some event and go to it and actually sit there and listen to what's going on in technology work in their libraries. And CNI is a great one because they sort of feel like it's administrators, but maybe challenge them to go a little bit past that world. So advertise, and if they don't go, come back with your knowledge from these conferences and advertise it. Talk about it in your organization. Do talks, write it up, make it public, put it on their desk, put it in their stream of information. Communicate back more clearly than maybe you do right now. The second one is, for some of you, and I talk to people about this all the time, consider leadership. You know, be the change you want to see, blah, blah, blah. You know, but there is some truth to this, that you should really sort of step up and think about taking on a leadership role. It's not all pain and well, there's a lot of pain, but the pain is good pain, and it makes you a stronger person. So, and you can move a lot forward. You can affect a lot of change if you step up in the organization, and you can start sort of solving the problem yourself. So if you're inclined to do this, think about it and talk to people who do it, and figure out how to get up there. And the third one, going to the third question, is take part in searches. Insert yourself into these processes. Make your voices heard. You know, get out there, speak clearly and persuasively. I've seen so many searches where the wrong candidate gets hired, you know, and this is in institutions where I've worked, and, you know, people come to your office and say, well, God, I can't believe, you know, they didn't listen to us. I'm like, well, did you fill out a feedback form? Oh, no one reads those. And let me tell you, a lot of you have been on the inside of searches as well. Those things are what tip things off fences. What people say in the organization matters so much in searches, because ULs, especially, who hold the decision on this, and public library directors equally so, they will do what they think is going to upset the fewest people. Those feedback forms are make or break. So if that's all you do in the search, do that, but preferably take a more active role. And that's it. I'll stop.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Dale. All right, and next we have up Peter Binkley. I don't even know how to begin to introduce this, so I'm just going to let him roll with it.
Yeah. Sorry, there's been a bit of confusion. Let me get this. My name is Eleanor Campion. I'm here from the Nebraska Union Catalog Project. I wanted to thank the organizers of Access 1938 for inviting me to speak to you today. It's been a wonderful conference. I really hope the idea takes off. Yeah, so I'm the director of the Nebraska Union Catalog Project. I got started, we all know how in the last few years libraries have become workshops for the application of the latest in information technology. And even in these years of terrible depression, we've been pushing ahead and applying these technologies. And of course, of these, the most important is film slides, which you may know as microfilm. That seems to be the new term. And I got started with this in 1933 with the Philadelphia Union Catalog Project, which we started right after the election of President Roosevelt. And in those first 100 days, all of those new relief programs coming out, which gave us access to a supply of relief labor that we gradually learned to use in these projects. And we've now been through several of them. After Philadelphia, there was a big one in Cleveland, directed by Professor Robert C. Binkley, I'm sorry, and several others. And we've really got the process pretty much worked out now. I'm writing up a report for the WPA technical report series for libraries. And I just thought I'd take this opportunity to run you through the process. How do you do a union catalog based on the card catalogs of a number of local libraries? Obviously, microfilm is where you start. Send your microfilm crews in, film all the cards in all the drawers of the catalog. Of course, we're running a union catalog for essentially for fulfilling interlibrary loan requests. So we only need to support known item finding. So we only are filming the author cards and the serial cards. So the first thing is someone goes in and finds all those cards in each drawer and tips them up. So they're easy for the microfilm technicians to get. Microfilm technicians come in with their Recordac cameras. I'm sure you've heard of these. These were developed for the banking industry to photograph checks. So they're perfect for photographing file cards. You can just feed them through one at a time. And they do a really nice job. You get 16 millimeter microfilm out of it. So after you've done this, you've got, from the lab, you'll get back 100-foot lengths of microfilm with all these cards on them. Now you need to type them up. And I've got some pictures of our crew. Here. Get that open. So it's more or less visible. And these are WPA white-collar workers, unemployed clerks, typists, receptionists, all of the ones who, WPA workers who are less suitable for the more manual labor that the WPA is better known for road building and so on, and who are happy to get a white-collar job. So we employ these in large numbers, of course. The mandate of the WPA is to employ as many people as possible. So labor-intensive processes are perfect. So type up all the cards, train them in basic layout of a catalog card. We've simplified the layout slightly, and in my report there will be examples. Type all the cards. So now you have a duplicate set of cards for the selected cards. We then sort them. Of course, we're working from multiple libraries who may or may not have applied the usual rules of filing in a rigorous way, so we need to sort to be sure we get the things consistent. Having done this, we have a base set of cards. We start with the largest library, of course, so our base set is as complete as we can make it. Then, with that base set, we use a simple bit of office information technology, stamp them. So we have stamps made with the symbols for all of the collections we're going to be using. For the base set, we start with the largest library, stamp every card with that library's sign, and then file them together. And then finally deduplicate them. So this worker is, you can see she's got some cards in bundles and they're tipped up. Those are ones where we have the same item in more than one collection. So she will group those together, paperclip them, tip them up like that so that they can be checked, and put the best card on the top of the pile. If there's a printed Library of Congress card, of course, we'll go with that. If there isn't, she'll choose the best one from among the ones that are represented there. Once those groupings have been checked, it goes back to the stamper, who will transfer the stamps for all of the other libraries from the cards that are being rejected and stamp them onto the front card, and that gets filed into the union catalog. The extra cards often go back to the source catalog. They're often the handwritten cards, the ones that haven't been modernized, and so they're happy to get a nice typed one to replace their handwritten ones with. Microfilm is a wonderful technology for this. Among other things, if we have a card with non-Roman characters on it, obviously it can't be handled by one of our regular office typewriters, so that has to go through a special workflow, and we signal that with a conductor's punch. And when a typist finds a card like that, they just punch a notch in the edge of the microfilm. And then the special typist with the fancy typewriter holds finger and thumb on either side of the microfilm as they scroll through, and whenever they feel one of these notches, they stop, and they know that there's a card they need to deal with. So it's a fairly simple process. I think we've worked out all the bugs. I encourage, if you don't have a local union catalog, I encourage you to try one of these projects. Apply for WPA funding. It's not hard to get. There's been some concern that it may be withdrawn, but I think with the reduction of political tensions since Mr. Chamberlain and Herr Hitler have resolved their differences recently, I can't foresee any near-term risk of loss of funding. So that is that. I wanted to do this partly because I was reminded of these photos by Danielle's butcher picture yesterday. I found the same photos in a newspaper. And partly, I just love the fact that for every new complicated digital task we take on in libraries, if you research the history of it, you'll almost always find someone who was doing the same thing with analog technologies right before the digital age came along. And these card catalogs, the Cleveland one carried on into the mid-70s and was only replaced when an OCLC terminal was installed. So, there we are.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Peter. All right, next up we have Sara, who wants to talk to us a little bit about acceptance tests. Did you have anything on the computer? Or?
I apologize in advance for all the puns, but when you use a syntax called gherkin, what are you supposed to do with your life? So at Artifactual, we've started using Gherkin to write feature files just about over the past 8 to 10 months. I don't really know what we were doing before this. We were, because I'd never really worked on feature development before we started using Gherkin files, so I'm very privileged. I know we were doing things like user stories. It was very complicated. So we started using Gherkin as a way to simplify our feature development process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But I need to give full credit to the staff at the Rockefeller Archive Center for this title because they're good at puns and I'm actually not. So what is Gherkin? It's acceptance tests, but a little bit fancy, by which I actually mean it's simple. It lets you describe software's behavior without detailing how that behavior is implemented. So it's really great for somebody like me. I'm not a developer, but I do need to define how features are going to work in our software from a user's perspective. So I take the role as the archivist, and I need to describe how they are expecting the feature to work, what the limitations of the features will be. And then this goes to our developers who use that information to actually write the feature. Gherkin is a line-oriented language that uses indentation to define structure. So it's written in plain text. It uses indents and line breaks. That's all there is to the syntax. There's no markdown, no markup required. So it's very easy for people to start writing. It takes nothing. You can write it in a Google Doc. That's how we generally start with our Gherkin. So why does it exist and why do we use it? It serves two purposes. It's documentation. So it actually is the starting point for all of our documentation for new features now. Before I even start a feature, I have at least a skeleton of the documentation that I'm going to need to write eventually for the project. So when we develop new features, we add it to Archivematica's public documentation. And I get to start writing it before there's even a feature for me to start playing with, which is awesome. And it also provides the basis for automated tests. Archivematica and Atom have never really had automated tests, and that means that there's a huge burden on myself and the other analysts that I work with, my colleagues Sara, Dan, and Kelly, to do functional testing for both applications every time we do a release. So we are sitting there clicking like as many buttons as we can in the applications, and that takes dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of hours of our time. So we want to use more automated tests. I can write these feature files that describe our feature, and because they're written in this Gherkin syntax, our developers actually use those exact tests to make those exact feature files to make automated tests. So I'm writing something that they can actually use. They're very lightweight and more focused than user stories, and it's very easy to learn. I've never I've never written a user story before, and it took me about 5 minutes to learn how to write a Gherkin file, which was great. So this is what they kind of look like. If you go to our GitHub Artifactual Labs repo, you can check out all of our acceptance tests for the Archivematica project. This is the description of a feature. So we've been working on ape encryption. So in plain text, this is what the feature will do. Archivematica users and administrators want to be able to store apes encrypted. One motivation for this is that multiple copies of apes may be stored in locations where their owners do not have complete control over who may have access to them. So very clear language, anybody can understand. I realize this is a bit small, but again, you can go to that repo and see what it is. This is the actual syntax of Gherkin. So if you're storing an uncompressed ape, given that there's this encrypted space and there's all of these other conditions, when a transfer is initiated and it has all of these other conditions, then this is what happens. And you can download an uncompressed ape. So that's the feature. Like that's it right there. I can write it, I can understand it. This is clear enough that we can share it with the collaborators that we work with. So the folks that were working on this encrypted ape work, who are the folks at SFU, we can share this directly with them and they can provide feedback and say, that's not how I actually thought it was going to work, or it is exactly how I thought it would work. In terms of results, our developers are really closely involved with feature scoping from the beginning, which is awesome. I hate the idea of just making a document and giving it to a developer and being like, please just do this. That's not a collaborative way to work with them. So nowadays, my time's up. I'm going to take advantage of other people being short. Our developers have one-click tests they can run. So they can turn these into tests. They use Selenium and Behave to turn these into tests. It means that I can participate in the automated testing process, which is really, really nice because I am really nosy and I like to know exactly what's going on all through the application. We can share them with our development partners. And ideally, everybody has a better understanding of what the feature will do or will not do. So that's the goal. And I'm sorry about all the puns, but thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Sara. All right. Next up, we've got Cody Fullerton, who's going to talk about implementing Arduino loans at UManitoba. Awesome. If he can make his way through this dense, dense maze of tables. Do you have anything you want on the computer?
I was going to show a website. One second. Shout out to Ruby Warren. This is her baby right here. So my name's Cody, and I work at U of M, and I'm a liaison librarian. Do we have any other liaisons, reference librarians? A few? Right on. So I'm going to be the one who's implementing Shelley's booklets just to hand out to students. I'm sure that was that was what that talk was about, right? Or am I getting it wrong? So my library, I work in the science library and I work in the social science humanities library. So I wear many hats, but I started in the science library and I don't have a science background, and I'm working with computer science students, and so that's why I decided to come last year and this year, because I got a lot out of last year. But Stephen Sloan from UNB, who was one of their former librarians, he was talking to me about maybe doing some technology loans. And my university is kind of getting away from technology loans. We had a really successful laptop loaning program, and so we just stopped doing that, and students are constantly coming in asking to borrow laptops because they did last year, and they don't like to bring their laptop to school, and all the computers are being used, right? So I really want to keep us in that conversation of technology loans. And so I went to the computer science department and I asked them if they thought this was a good idea. I talked to some students and they said, yeah, I have this project that I could just do some stuff on the Arduino and then just put it on a little paper and give it to my professor, and like but I don't have that myself, and I'm broke. So, even though they're cheap. So I really wanted to just kind of make it available to them, and they're not exactly out right now. I was hoping for it, but I've hit a lot of technical issues and some bureaucracy issues as I've been going. But because students always use subject guides for everything, I made a subject guide. This is my fancy Arduino page. And all of these, and I like to put these little icons in here. This is a program, Font Awesome, that you can just put in there with a little bit of HTML code. But so I've actually gotten, even though they're not ready yet, I've gotten quite a few hits on here, and I've gotten lots of emails from students about them just wanting to be able to access this stuff. And it's going to be in our engineering library, and so only engineering students and computer science students really use the building or know about that library. So I'm kind of assuming, not all the way, but I'm kind of assuming that everyone's going to kind of know how to use these right off the bat. But if they don't, I have this and I have some other material, and I'm going to be doing a assessment of how it goes this semester and maybe a little bit into next semester, because I wanted to do it just this semester, but I haven't been able to roll them out yet. And then I'm going to be writing up a report and trying to, if it's successful, which I hope it's going to be, writing a report and submitting it to my head and our university librarian to maybe support other technology loans, like Raspis or something like that, because I want to keep this moving. And that's it.
Great. And last but certainly not least, we have Ryan Regier, who wants to talk about open access and cost per use. Do you have anything on the computer? I'll just leave up the puns thing just in case.
That's great. Be a little bit of humor in my talk. Hi, so I'm Ryan. So I work with the Public Health Education Library. So about a month ago, maybe less than a month ago, there was a journal article released. It was called The State of OA. I think it's still in preprint format. But essentially, it was a few great librarians, some open access advocates, took like a large-scale look at open access for journal articles. And the findings were pretty shocking. One of the main things is that from 2015, 45% of journal articles are now open access. And to me, that's a huge number. But also, as like a research library, a lot of our money we paid and we're still paying for access to these 2015 journal articles. So if 45% that's open access, like there's a lot of money being wasted there, I feel. Especially now with the serious crisis ongoing, just budget pressures and just Canadian dollar being really low. So I'm like, okay, so there's got to be a way we can, be more cost effective. Haven't really done much yet, but I've been thinking about it a lot. So before I want to talk about that, so just in the paper, it kind of identified 4 different types of open access. There's obviously the gold open access journals, so just article post is in charge, author pays to publish, and a journal makes it open access. There's green open access, we all know as well. So so the author still publishes in a journal, but they kind of archive that copy somewhere in an institutional repository or a ResearchGate or something like that. Hopefully not ResearchGate. Then there's hybrid open access. So essentially, it's like a gold open access journal, but only some of the papers are open access with author pays for those as well. And one of the cool things this paper did was identify bronze OA, which they new topic. And essentially, bronze open access are open access journal articles that don't have any copyright information attached. There's no open copyright. So it's just stuff the publisher makes accessible. You don't know how long it's going to be accessible for. It's just kind of there. And that, for me, electronic resource management, that's always really hard because you come across a journal and it looks like it's all open access. So we want to kind of activate it and make it accessible on our knowledge base. People can find it. But that might change. We don't know if it's open access, how long. We don't know how many articles are. So it's kind of frustrating that publishers kind of doing this because we want to be able to make that content discoverable and findable researchers, and we can't really. So at the end of the year, when libraries are kind of looking at the journal articles journals to make sure it's worth subscribing, they do a cost per use analysis. So they go, hey, we're spending this much on journals. We have this much usage. What's overall cost per use? And with the amount of open access articles, essentially our cost per use, it actually could be a lot higher than it looks. Because really, our cost per use, we only want to look at stuff we're really paying for, but a bunch of open access stuff is caught in there. So I'm trying to think of how we can kind of solve this problem, how we can we can put these open access stuff in our discovery tools, and there's been some really great stuff. The people who did that State of OA print, there's some people from Impact Story, and they have the new browser extension on Paywall, which is awesome, really good for finding open access articles. One of the pieces they have on that as well is it's based off the OA DOI. So it's like it's a DOI link resolve. You put in DOI, it finds an article, but the OA DOI will find an open access version of the article. So it'll search hybrid journals. It'll pick up bronze. It searches base repository, other repositories. So OA DOI recently released a new API, version 2, which actually has the ISNs of journals now for journal articles. So this raises an interesting possibility. If I'm looking at a journal and I want to see if it's cost effective, I can actually go to that journal, and using this API, I can search and be like, okay, what percentage of this journal is open access? Right? And that'll take green open access, hybrid, bronze, and gold. Well, usually won't be gold. But that's really cool. So that's an aspect, and that's still, they just released that. So if anybody wants to play around with that and create like a usable tool, that'd be really cool for me, so I could kind of go in and make sure I'm subscribing to cost-effective journals, so there's something out there. Another thing, and I've kind of written a blog post about this, is bronze OA. It's still really frustrating because it's temporary. We don't know what's going on there. So I do feel we need some sort of index for like bronze OA. So we need something that like commits publishers, even if they're not using like open copyright, Creative Commons license, just something to commit them to keeping that stuff open. So it's always open in our repository, our knowledge base, and people can find it. So something kind of like what DOAJ, so Directive Open Access Journals, did some really great stuff on like making gold open access journals kind of consistent, and the practice kind of standardized, and kind of obligating them to stay gold open access. So something like that for bronze OA would be really cool. So if somebody else wants to build that, that would be fantastic. And yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.